Welcome to 1 Minute Scripture Study, a Come Follow Me podcast.
We are your hosts, Kristen Walker-Smith and Callie Black.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Big Picture Monday. This is Callie Black here with all the context that you need to totally get this week's Come Follow Me reading. And this week's assigned reading is Doctrine and Covenants, sections 67 through 70. And this is for June 21st through June 27th. Hey, did you know that this is our halfway point? This is it. This is the halfway point of the year, the last week in June, our last full week in June. And this is also the halfway point when it comes to our Come Follow Me schedule for the Doctrine and Covenants. Way to go. Look at us. Halfway done. But if you're using my Big Picture, Little Picture study guide, you may have noticed it ends in section 70 at the end of this week. This week is the last week you're using it because it is part 1. I wanted to let you know part 2 is totally ready for you. If you go to comefollowmestudy.com, you can grab your digital download of part 2, which will take you all the way from next week until the end of the year. Section 71 through 138. I will take you through all the big picture context, but also taking you through every single section in the entire Doctrine and Covenants and giving you that little picture glimpse and teaching you how to apply the scriptures to your life personally. It's just one of my favorite resources, and I'm so glad that so many of you love it too. Don't forget, as an exclusive discount, a listener to our podcast, 1 Minute Scripture Study, you can always use the code OMSS and get a 20% discount. We say that at the end of every episode, but it is totally true even for my part 2. And I wanted to give you a heads up. If you're more of a physical book type of person, you can also grab this version on Amazon. So head to Amazon and search for my name, Callie Black, my study guide, or Big Picture, Little Picture, or just head to my website and I'll take care of you and point you in the right direction. So make sure you grab that so that you have it for next week when we start the second half of the Doctrine and Covenants. Okay, you ready to finish up the first half though? Here we go. This week we have 4 revelations, right? Sections 67 through 70. And all 4 of these revelations were given to Joseph during November 1831. So it was kind of a busy month for the church. It really was busy though. There were a series of a few different important church meetings, including multiple church conferences, most of them held in Hiram, Ohio. And this really is important. And it's interesting that we're ending the first half of the Doctrine and Covenants studying this, because this is what set up the collection of the revelations for the Doctrine and Covenants. So I actually want to take your minds all the way back to the first week in January of this year, because we studied section 1, that very first week of the Doctrine and Covenants. If you remember, if you were listening to Big Picture Monday at that point, I told you to not worry too much about the context because it was actually a year and a half after the church had been organized. Well, here we are. This is it. At this church conference in Hiram, Ohio in November 1831, the Lord revealed that a lot of the revelations that Joseph had been receiving should be published in a book known at that point in time as the Book of Commandments, although this would later change to the Doctrine and Covenants. And he gave them a revelation that set up the purpose of this book. And at that time, they called it the preface and stuck it at the beginning of the Book of Commandments, but it has now been known as section 1. So it might be even fun to reread section 1 this week, since it's all received at the same time as these other 4 sections. Okay, so the next revelation, and now we're jumping back to section 67 that we're actually studying this week. It addresses some of the elders that were assembled in this conference, and some of them were concerned that these revelations that they were compiling into the Book of Commandments were not worded in the way that they should be. They didn't sound as educated or as refined as they thought that revelation from the Lord should sound. So Joseph brought this issue to the Lord, and he received the revelation known as 67, where the Lord basically challenges, in a very kind way, he challenges any of the men there to try and rewrite any of the sections better than what had already been received by Joseph. A few of the men tried, but they realized they couldn't do it. There was no way of rewriting it that could come close to the spirit and the original wording that captured that feeling. And so these men were humbled and they agreed to publish all the revelations, including section 1, that preface, as they were written. Next, and then we aren't sure exactly what order some of these were in, but in section 68, Orson Hyde, Luke Johnson, Lyman Johnson, and William McClellan each asked Joseph to ask the Lord what his will was for them, and Joseph received the revelation known as section 68. The Lord teaches these men about serving missions and teaching by the Spirit. And it's also pretty important because it mentions that children should be baptized at the age of 8. So this is where that doctrine comes from. And it tells us that parents are the ones responsible for teaching them the basic truths that will lead to their decision to be baptized. All of the responsibility is on the parents prior to their age of accountability. Section 69 was given a few days after that conference in Hiram. So at that conference back there, Oliver Cowdery had been tasked with taking this transcript of all the revelations in it to Missouri because it was going to be printed in Missouri. But in section 69, the Lord revealed that he wanted John Whitmer to accompany Joseph on this trip to Missouri with the manuscripts so that they could make sure it got there safely. Also, the Lord kind of hints at Oliver Cowdery not having the best intentions, and just kind of sets the precedent that if something important is going to happen, there needs to be more than one person there to make sure it all goes down okay. And John Whitmer, if you remember him, he was serving as Joseph's scribe and the historian for the church. He was also asked now to write a history of the church. And as a fun fact, because Joseph's just receiving a lot of revelations here, another revelation was also given at this time that would serve as the appendix to the Book of Commandments. So it was at the very end, but then it was later assigned the number of section 133. So keep this in mind. When we get to section 133, I'm going to say, hey, remember all those revelations about establishing the Doctrine and Covenants? This is when it happened. And then finally, section 70 was given at another small church conference in Hiram just a few days later, where they actually decided which revelations were going to make it into the Book of Commandments. And the Lord asked Joseph Smith, Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, John Whitmer, Sidney Rigdon, and William W. Phelps to ratify the importance of the Book of Commandments, and then instructed them on how to be righteous stewards over this project and the other assignments they might get in the future. Okay, that's it. It's a perfect little halfway point in our study of the Doctrine and Covenants by studying all of the meetings and revelations that made this collection and publication of modern revelations top priority. So preface and suffix revelations were given at the same time, but those are now numbered as sections 1 and 133. So we aren't specifically talking about them this week, but I want to make sure you know this all happened at the same time. Section 67 was the Lord addressing the men who felt that the revelations were not well written. Section 68 gives advice to 4 specific men, but also addresses teaching your children prior to their baptism at age 8. Section 69 asks John Whitmer to accompany Oliver on his trip to Missouri with all those sacred revelations. And then section 70 is kind of the concluding meeting where certain men were instructed on their stewardships and the importance of the Book of Commandments that they had just ratified. Now that you see the big picture for this week's readings, you can focus your time diving into the important little picture by finding the spiritual lessons and making changes in your life. So in your big picture, little picture study guide for the last week this week, you can work on the spiritual questions I've created for sections 67 through 70. My personal focus question for this week is, how can I avoid thinking that I know better than the Lord? Don't forget to head to comefollowmestudy.com and I'll get you all hooked up with part 2 of your study guide so you are ready to go for next week. Thank you so much for being here today and happy studying. If you'd like to get even more scripture study help, we have 2 awesome options for you.
Do you want to learn how you can have quality scripture study in just minutes a day? Grab the 1-Minute Scripture Study Journal, which will teach you and your family 4 crucial steps that will totally revolutionize the way you study the scriptures. You can get your copy at rubygirl.org/shop.
Or if you'd like us to walk with you section by section through the Doctrine and Covenants, grab my Big Picture, Little Picture study guide and use the coupon code OMSS, that's for 1 minute scripture study, to get 25% off the purchase price. You can grab your copy at comefollowmestudy.com/shop. Links are in the show notes.